is yet another experience that teaches us that nothing in the world is to my liking. Nothing in the world is the way I want it to be. If the world were the way I wanted it to be, all I'd have to do is actually wake up and everything would be set up around my bed, and I should be able to do the sermon from there. Or I should just be able to think the words, and then they should be made out into sounds, and people should be able to hear a voice without me even having to open my mouth. That's how I would like. But the world is not to my liking. Technology isn't to my liking. The internet isn't to my liking. These laptops, these computers, these microphones, well, the entire world, the entire universe is not to my liking. And this is why I need to get out of here. This is why we all need to get out of here. Because if not, then we are in a constant battle with the world. We are constantly trying to switch the world around so that it is to my liking. And we'll never win. It's a battle that is not worth fighting, because you can't win that battle. That's like me trying to stop sunrise or sunset. I can close my eyes and then I'll not know whether it's sunrise or sunset. That's easier to do than trying to stop the sun rising in the first place. This is why, rather than trying to change the world, just close your eyes. Just change yourself, remove yourself from this world, and then none of the problems in the world become your problems. So, as I was saying at the beginning, we're gathered here again, and I do apologize for the late start. We're about an hour behind schedule. The technical issues was the problem there, but anyway, we're up and running now. As I was saying at the beginning, today we have the good fortune of having been homed, or rather we are in the premises of a local supporter of ours, a benefactor, and he has been kind enough to open his home to us, because we do still have some technical issues at the monastery, which prevents us from streaming these programs live, or in any way, live or dead, live or recorded rather. But today we are able to do that because we have an internet connectivity. But those issues will obviously slowly but gradually be resolved, and until such time comes, we remain determined to continue to spread the message of the Buddha, because it is that message that got us this far. It's his message that gave us the path to liberate ourselves from suffering, when we had no idea what we were doing with ourselves, with our thoughts, our speech and our actions, and constantly and continuously fighting a never winning battle, trying to pull everything together and live a life which was nothing but a struggle, trying to find happiness in a world where there was no happiness. It is because we had the good fortune and the good privilege of being able to come across a Kalyana Mitra, a noble associate, a noble friend, who gave us the message of the Lord Buddha. And it would have been a he or she, doesn't matter who it was. It is because they had the kindness and the compassion to endure pain and suffering and hardship and discomfort to give us this message. That is why we have found this path. So it is also our duty then to disseminate the Buddha's Dhamma all over the world as much as we can, and try as hard as we can, remain resolute, because if we can give the same salvation that we have to just one other person, then I think that is us beginning to repay the gratitude to the Great One, the Lord Buddha, the Blessed One. So, before we commence today's sermon, let us remind ourselves that it is absolutely because of His infinite compassion that we have this Dhamma today. Without Him, we will all just be lost in samsara, not knowing where we are coming or going, not knowing what we are doing, what we've done, what we want to do, and simply just living for the sake of being alive, trying to, as I said before, find happiness in a place where there is no happiness, trying to find satisfaction in a world where there is no satisfaction to be found. So, before we commence, let us pay our deepest respects to the Lord Buddha, and please join me in doing so. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Let us also remind ourselves that in the long time that we have spent in samsara, we have not always been so kind and generous as we are today. We have been very cruel indeed, very ungenerous, very unkind, selfish, and having been egotistical, we have always tried to up ourselves over everyone else. And in that view, in that belief, we have done a lot of disservice and done a lot of bad to lots of people. And so today, when we try to listen to the Dhamma, to try and understand the Dhamma, the karma that we would have released into the world, into the universe, in having done so, that karma, the vipakas for that karma, unfortunately, may now be blocking our path to salvation, our path to liberation, and our path to wisdom, our path to true understanding. So before we commence, let us remind ourselves of the fact that we have been the way that I've just explained. There is no doubt about that. But if we accept that fact, then we can be remorseful. We can be regretful. And to be remorseful and to be regretful does not mean to sulk in one corner of your bedroom and think, oh, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. Now what's going to happen to me? There is no point in doing that. But what we can do is seek the forgiveness of all those beings that we have been so cruel and been so unkind to. Particularly noble people, Aryas, who we may have come across, and especially when they may have tried to show us the path to liberation. Because of our ego, because of our ignorance and our delusion, we may have insulted them, we may have used words of slander to harm them and hurt them. And so today, as we prepare to listen to the Lord Buddha's Dhamma, let us seek their forgiveness, ask for their forgiveness, may they forgive us, and in doing so, may we be able to listen to this Dhamma, bear this Dhamma and understand this Dhamma, and may we be able to attain the noble attainments, that is Sotapanna, Sakurdagami, Anagami and Arihat. So please take a moment and in your hearts and in your minds ask for that forgiveness from the Samma Sambuddhas, the Paticca Buddhas, the Arahants, the Anagamis, the Sakurdagamis, the Sotapannas, whether they be on the path or have attained the fruit, as well as any worldly beings that we have done harm or hurt to. Okay? Also, make a firm determination that at the end of this sermon, you will achieve the noble attainments of Sotapanna, Sakurdagami, Anagami and Arihat. May that realization help you achieve the noble bliss, the eternal bliss of Nibbana. May you be able to free yourselves from the shackles of samsara and be free of all suffering. So please take a moment to make a firm determination that throughout today's sermon you will be able to pay complete attention and at the end of this sermon be able to achieve those noble attainments. Okay. I think I'm being informed again that there are issues with connectivity on Skype as well. I believe although we have a connection, it is an internet connection is possibly not strong enough to accommodate the Skype call, which explains why the web radio didn't work before either. I think what we'll do is we'll continue with the sermon and we'll make the recording available at the next earliest opportunity. I hope these issues will be resolved, by which I mean I hope it becomes clear in a short while on Skype, but I doubt there is anything I can do which I haven't done already to help make the listening experience any better. So I do apologize for that, but I think I've exhausted all options by this stage. Okay. There was a great question that we had from one of our listeners, and I always do love these questions because this is the kind of thing we need to talk about, and it shows clearly that our listeners are not just switching on their headsets or putting on their headsets and switching on their computers and kind of multitasking, going about their business, and at the end of the sermon the computer has listened to the sermon but not the person that sat down to listen to it. So it makes me very happy that these sermons are found to be helpful by our listeners, and the nature and the quality of these questions are evidence to that. By which I don't mean that if you don't send me a question, you don't listen to these sermons or you don't understand this. So that is not what I meant there. And this is also not an invitation to just throw random questions out. By all means, please do send us questions. You can post them on Skype, you can get them to us via any other communications channels that may be open to you. But in doing so then, please ensure that the reason you're asking the question is for your own understanding, and it's for the purpose of trying to achieve Nibbana. It's for the purpose of trying to understand the reality of the world, and not necessarily to learn about the world, because we've done plenty of that many times in samsara, and to continue to do that today is not going to get us any further than we are today. So what we need to do is to try and understand the reality of samsara, to understand the reality of ourselves really, the world that we live in, the world that we create for ourselves. That is where the problem is, as we did discuss a couple of weeks ago. So this question was, let me pull that up. So this person says, please kindly help me with the below. As per my understanding, Loka, which is the world, has 4 attributes: Sankathai, Paticca, Samuppannai, Kalatuwawa, Vayadhammai. Can you please elaborate more on Paticca Samuppannai in this context? I have a basic idea of Paticca Samuppada, including Avyakrita Paticca Samuppada, but cannot map it to the above context point of view. I understand that Paticca Samuppanna cycle is happening in the mind. Loka is made of Patavi, Apo, Tejo and Vayu. Okay. So, I think if I started talking about this today, we can talk about this for about the next 6 months. Such is the profoundness of this question, and the depth and the width of this problem. question. But what we'll do is we'll get started. We'll start to look at what has been asked, and perhaps we'll make a start at least, and then over time we'll eventually get to the answer. So the question here is, he or she is asking about the world, the loka, and remember, we define the world as per the Buddha's definition. The Buddha defines the world in in several different ways. I wouldn't say lots, but in several different ways. He says the world can be seen as the Pancha Upadana Skandha. He said it can be seen as Paticca. He said it could be seen as the Salayatana, or the 12 ayatanas. And he said, in either of these ways, or in whichever way you look at the world, it's what we need to realize is this world is something that we create for ourselves in our minds. As we discussed last week, and as the listener has clearly identified, he says he understands that that the world is made of Apo, Tejo, Vayu, Patavi. So we are not talking about trying to put a stop or eradicate the world the physical world that we live in, but rather we are working with the problem is with the world that we create in our minds, and that's the problem we're trying to solve here. Now, these 4 attributes are most certainly the 4 attributes that the Lord Buddha said were qualities of this world that we create for ourselves. Sankathai, meaning, so let's look at the etymology of these words, and that will help us gain a good understanding. Sankatha, sang being bringing together, like Sankara, Sangita, meaning music, and in the sense of the word Sangita in Sinhala, it's bringing together various notes. When you bring together various notes, now you have a song, and a song is nothing but a whole bunch of notes played in sequence or together, and that is what a song is. So a sankata is very similar. Sang being the bringing together, and kata or kruta is action. So the action of bringing together and is the result of something that is sankata. Now, sang can also be seen as avidya trishna, or that is avidya being ignorance and trishna being attachment, and which way you look at it depends on whether we are speaking in relation to an arahant, or we are speaking in relation to a worldly being. That doesn't have to be a prutakjana, it could be anyone other than an arahant. For an arahant, a sankata can only be something that is an attribute of something that has been brought together. So for example, if I were to build a house, then the bringing together of bricks and cement and sand and stones and water and the various other parts that make that house is a sankata, bringing together of the various parts. Whereas if we look at sang as being avidya and trishna, ignorance and attachment, then that is also sankata. So it depends on which context you are looking at it. But as we are talking about the world that we create in our minds, then of course sankata is an attribute of the world, by which is meant the world is a result of the bringing together or the coming together of conditions brought together and cemented, glued together with avidya and tanha. Without avidya and tanha, or without ignorance and attachment, you can't bind the things that you bring together. So ignorance is the water that binds the attachment which is the cement. So you can take it through that analogy. If you're building a house, the water is avidya, ignorance, and the cement is tanha. Okay? That is an attribute of things that are conditioned. Then you have Paticca. So, and that is the question, please can you elaborate more on Paticca? What Paticca or Paticca teaches us? Paticca or Paticca means it has the attribute of being the result of the Paticca process, the causal dependent process. So the word causal dependency or causal origination in itself has or implies the meaning that it is the result of various causes coming together. And without causes coming together, you don't have that object, you don't have that person, you don't have that thing which we are talking about. Now, when we talk about Paticca, again let's look at the etymology of that word. Paticca Samuppada. And if it is a result of the Paticca Samuppada process, then we can say that it is Paticca. Okay? And then that is the attribute. So for example, if I took a glass of water and if I freeze it, I can then say that this water is frozen. Likewise, because it has gone through the freezing process, we call that is frozen water or ice. Similarly, if we take an object, an animal, or anything for that matter, anything that is the result of conditions coming together, because the origination of that has gone through the causal origination process, Paticca process, we can say it is Paticca. Paticca. Iccha is liking. This is why we have always talked about, in the past we talk about anicca. What is not to my liking is anicca. What is not to the world is not to my liking, and therefore we say it is anicca. And therefore iccha is liking, my will, my liking, my desire. Okay. Pati is to attach, to bond. Sama is equal, Uppada is to give rise to. So that which has been given rise to as a result of bonding to what I like is Paticca or the process of Paticca. So what do I mean by that? Let's break this down and take it to in a way that makes sense and in the very simplistic terms. I'll tell you about something that we were discussing with some other monks in the monastery recently. That is, let's take the example of where you have a bunch of people standing together. So they're standing as a group, and you have all types of people. They're dressed in different ways. So it's just a random population of people, and they're all just standing around randomly. If you looked at them, you couldn't tell if they were standing in any particular form or shape. They're just standing randomly, would be the best way to describe it. And even, regardless of who you ask, they're all going to say, oh, no, we're just standing around, we're not standing in a queue or in a line or anything of that, so we're just standing around. It's like if you walk into a busy market square, you'd see people everywhere. And that would be people just standing around randomly, or in a park, for example, right? Now, what I can do at this point is take a bit of metal. Now, the reason I take metal is because I can define a certain shape with that metal, rather than taking rope, for instance, and I make a lasso out of this. So I bend this wire, so it's wire, it's a metal wire. I bend this metal wire and I make a lasso out of it. So a lasso is something that if you remember old cowboy movies or cowboy cartoons, it's the rope that they used to catch animals, and sheriffs used to catch robbers when they used to run away. So that's a lasso. And if you use various software tools, and you find this thing called a lasso tool, so that the latter may be a more familiar use of the word lasso than perhaps others who may not know who a sheriff is to begin with. But anyway, we make a lasso out of metal wire, and then what I can do at this point is, holding on to one end of this metal wire, throw this lasso out into over the heads of these people. Let's assume that it's not going to hurt anybody, because we don't want to do that. And after I've thrown this lasso out to them, it's going to land, and it's going to land in such a way that once it has landed and once it has hit the ground, there will be people that are standing inside of the lasso, and there will be people who are stood outside of the lasso. And that's just random. I just threw the lasso. I didn't make any kind of distinction. I didn't pick and choose the people I was going to throw it at. I just randomly threw it out. But it landed on the ground. And again, assume that hasn't landed on anyone's shoulders. It's just completely gone and hit the ground, and it's parallel to the ground right now. It's resting on the ground. Now, if I ask all the people that are stood outside of the shape of this lasso to move out of the way, guys, get out of the way, and just those people who remain inside the lasso to be there, assuming that the shape of this lasso was circular, once all the other people have moved away, what you're going to see is that all the people that are stood inside the lasso are actually standing in a circle. Now, where did this circle come from? The circle, and remember, the people just stood randomly from the beginning, and they're still standing around randomly right now, until I said, can everyone else that is not within the lasso, can you all move out of the way? Those inside the lasso, don't move an inch, just stand where you are, okay? And when everyone else has moved out of the way, what you're going to see is that people are now standing in what looks like a circle. The reason they're standing in a circle is clearly because when I threw the lasso, because the lasso had the shape of a circle, now you're seeing that they're all standing in a circle. If this lasso was, for example, a square shape, and I did the same experiment and I asked everyone else to move out of the way, people would now be standing in the shape of a square. Now, before I threw the lasso, if I had asked them the question, those who are standing in a circle, can you please raise your hands up? No one's going to raise their hands up. If I threw the square lasso and I asked them, anyone standing within the lasso in the shape of a square, please raise your hands up. No one's going to raise their hands up, because they're going to look around them. I can't see any circle. I'm not standing in a circle. I'm just standing around randomly. So no one's going to raise their hands up. But now that I've thrown this lasso out, and I've asked everyone else to move out of the way, people that are stood within the perimeter of the lasso are now going to raise their hands up and say, well, actually, yes, we are standing in a circle now. So a circle that didn't used to exist before exists now. All I did was throw a lasso out. Why is it that now the people who are stood in exactly the same positions that they were stood before now think that they're standing in a circle, when 5 minutes ago or 5 seconds ago even, they just said they were standing in random form. They weren't standing in any kind of shape or any kind of form. They were just randomly standing around, and now they're standing in a circle. What we've got to realize here is, the reason that they think and they feel that they're now standing in the shape of a circle is because I defined the shape that they are now standing in. Now that shape was the shape of the lasso. So if you're now standing within that circle, then they're now going to look around, they're going to look at each other, and they're all going to see almost this virtual circle that they're stood within. It's a virtual circle. There's no real circle there. Now that circle, that lasso, was something that I threw out into the world. So likewise, I see what I want to see. The reason that I see that people are now standing in the shape of a circle is because that's a shape that I defined in my own mind. I'll give you another example. When you're walking around in town and say you walk up to a cash machine, an ATM, you're going to see that people are standing in a queue. If you remove the ATM and you just said freeze everyone, no one's going to move right now, you're just going to stand where you are. If you remove the ATM and then look at people, you're not going to see a queue. Again, you're just going to see random people. But you put the ATM back into the scene, and you're going to see a queue. You see, the reason for this is our minds project into the world what we want to see. And when we want to see something, we see that thing. Sometimes people are, they fear ghosts. People think they see ghosts. Sometimes they see a cat in a shadow, or perhaps the fallen branch of a tree. And people get really worried and really scared, and they think they've seen a ghost. But actually all they've seen is just a cat, or a fallen branch of a tree. How did they see the ghost? Well, actually the ghost existed in their minds. And this is what they have been able to project out into the world. And now you're seeing what you wanted to see. You're seeing what was created in your own mind. So what is created in my mind, I'm able to create in the outside world. What is in my mind is what I'm attached to. Icha. Icha is what I like, what I want, what I desire. So if it's the shape of a circle that I desire, then that is what I'm attached to, that is what I like, that is what I'm going to attach myself to, so Paticca. And what's going to be created in the outside world is something that is equal to that, Samuppannai. So Paticca Samuppannai. This is why when I see a circle outside, this circle is in my mind. Let's take another example. You might have seen sometimes logos of companies where you just have straight lines that are drawn in a way that there's a line at the top which is short, it gets longer, it keeps getting longer until it comes to a certain point, and then it gets shorter again. When you look at this series of lines, what do you see again? You see a circle. Where was the circle? It was just a series of lines. Series of lines which were short to begin with. It grew in length, grew a bit longer, and then you get the longest, the line that is the longest in length, and then it reduces in length again, and it becomes a really short line. Now when you look at it, you're seeing a circle. Where's the circle? There is no circle. But you see those lines, and in your mind you've just created this circle. Another example would be you see the wheel of a car as a car drives past, or a fan, for instance. Now, as we've all obviously seen this at home, you see a fan that's turning one way, and once you switch the fan off, what you're going to see is actually the blades of the fan are turning in the opposite direction. So actually the blades of the fan are turning in the opposite direction, but you're seeing as if it's turning in the other direction. Or as these blades are turning, you're seeing a circle, when actually there is no circle. It's just three blades of the fan. So where did the circle come from? So that circle existed in our mind. So this is what we need to understand. Now the point being here, it's because that is what we are attached to. We then forecast that into the world, and then that is what is given rise to. Paticca Samuppannai. Now, because it is Paticca, it is conditioned. Because what is given rise to in the world is what we bring together through the process of Paticca Samuppannai. By using ignorance and attachment, we bind the materials, the raw materials that make the world outside. Now, clearly, as this person has outlined here, the loka is made of, the world is made of Patavi, Apo, Tejo and Vayu. So these are the four fundamental elements that exist outside, but through attachment and ignorance, we bring these things together and then forecast what's in our mind onto the four fundamental elements that exist outside in nature, and what didn't exist before, we begin to see now. If you remember, last week we gave the example of where you have, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, three individuals, you bring a woman in front of them and you ask them, who is this? The child says, it's my mother. The middle-aged person says, this is my wife. And the elderly person says, this is my daughter. They're looking at the same person. They're looking at the same Apo, Tejo, Vayu, Paticca. How is it that one person is seeing a mother, the other seeing a wife, and the other person seeing a daughter? Well, if it is the mother, then both of the other people all three people should be seeing the mother. If it's the wife, then all three people should be seeing the wife. If it's the daughter, then all three people should be seeing a daughter. And equally, depending on who you see, you're going to have different feelings, different Vedana inside your minds. So, to be able to generate different kinds of Vedana, well, clearly you should be seeing different kinds of Rupa. Different Rupa gives rise to different Sanya. Different Sanya gives rise to different kinds of Vedana and different kinds of Sankhara. All this is done by Vijnana. So Vijnana, which is the wizard that exists, this is why the Lord Buddha says that the Vijnana is in fact a wizard. This wizard is able to create outside in the world what exists in the mind. So this is what, when we use the word Paticca, what we need to understand is, remember this is one of the ways that the Buddha defined the world. Paticca. The world is Paticca, by which he meant the world is something that we create ourselves. The world exists in our mind and we project that world onto the outside, and now we see that what was in our mind is in the outside world. Because otherwise outside is just Apo, Tejo, Vayu, Paticca. So this is what we need to understand. Now the problem with this is, remember the reason that we created the outside world is because that is what I liked. That is what I am attached to. That's not to say that's what you're going to be attached to. That's not to say that's what someone else might like. So we're all liking and attaching ourselves and desiring different things, but we're all looking at the same object. We're all looking at the same physical object, but we all like if there's three of us here, if there's four of us here, the four of us like four different things. But we're all looking at the same object, and we're all projecting what's in our mind, so we're all projecting four different things. Now these four things needs to operate and act in four different ways. For example, the child wants the mother to be with the child and help him or her with their homework, read them a bedtime story. Okay, that is what the mother wants. That is what the child wants the mother to do. Whereas the husband does not. That's not what the husband wants the wife to do. The husband does not want bedtime stories. The husband doesn't want the wife to come and brush his teeth for him or tie his shoelaces. What the husband wants is for the wife to come and sit down by his side and perhaps have a meal together, or maybe go out for dinner, or watch TV, discuss something else. That's what he wants to do. Talk about their friends. That's what he wants to do. And again, the father will want something entirely different. He will want the daughter to come in and look after him, to attend to him, bring him his medicine. So now these three people are setting different expectations on the same physical person, because they're projecting different kinds of rupa, different kinds of vedana, different kinds of sanya, and three different kinds of sankhara. And each of these sets of sankhara have different types or different sankharas in these groups. Remember, sankhara is we are talking about sankhara skandha, not one sankhara. We're talking about aggregates. An aggregate is where we bring things together. Okay? So when we talk about sankharas and ask a child what is the sankhara of a mother, then he's going to tie my shoelaces, brush my teeth, make my breakfast, make me a cup of tea, pat my head, comb my hair, right? He's going to give me a wash. So all of these things are sankharas that are attached to this rupa that is a mother that exists within the child's mind. Now, if three different people are expecting three different things out of the same person, how can all three of them be happy? Well, it's just not possible. Because all three of them want that person to be with them and do different things. Well, you've only got two arms, you've only got one mind, two eyes, one nose, one mouth, and 2 ears. You can't be a mother and a wife and a daughter all at the same time. And then of course over and above that, there are expectations that you set on yourself. So you might say that, if someone came and asked you, who are you? You would say, I'm a hard-working woman. I'm a good employee. I'm a freedom fighter. I'm an activist. I'm a good citizen. Right? So all of these things are expectations that you have created in your mind and then you set on yourself. So these expectations you see within yourself. And this is why, to give another crude example, you go in front of the mirror, you're looking at a person that you think is the most beautiful person ever. You're looking at a person in the mirror and you're thinking, this is the most handsome guy ever. But when you go out in the world, no one cares to look at you. No one thinks, hey, I'd like to go out with him, or I'd like to go out with her. And you wonder, why is it no one looks at me? Why is it no one wants to talk to me? I'm the most beautiful person ever. I'm the most handsome man here. Well, that's your mind telling you that. You're projecting what's in your mind onto that physical form that you're seeing outside. That is the problem with what is Paticca Samuppannai. Because, and that is what Paticca Samuppannai is. Because that is what you're attached to. That is what you have been... remember again, this is why I need to keep going back to the etymology of the word. Ichcha is your liking. What do you like? And that is ichcha. Okay, because we know the world is not to my liking, I say the world is anicca. So if my liking is ichcha, what I want, my expectation is ichcha, then paticca is attachment to that. Wanting to give birth and give rise to what I'm attached to, what I'm liking, what I desire. And to do that, you bring together the Rupa, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, Patavi that exists in the world, and you create that in the outside world. Samaupada. This is what we do. We create in the outside world what exists in our mind. Now, it's a bit like virtual reality, really. I don't know if any of you have been able to experience this. So there are, if you ever get the chance, there are these goggles that you can wear and certain kinds of glasses, and I can't remember now what they're called. You put them over your eyes and you open your eyes and you look into the outside world and you see certain buildings and you see certain structures in the outside world which don't really exist there. You're just looking outside and you're seeing virtual buildings, you're seeing virtual people, you're seeing virtual trees, and all you're doing is just looking outside your garden. If you switch off the machine, it's just grass on plain land, on flat land. You put the glasses back on and flick the switch on, now you're seeing that world again. Paticca Samuppada is exactly that process. You're creating a virtual world in the real world. And you're expecting the real world to fit into the virtual world. That is the problem. Because the real world changes because it is conditioned. And in fact, actually, the world that you've created changes as well. When, today you like one thing. Today you like pizza. Tomorrow you like, today you like cheese and tomato pizza. Tomorrow you like chicken pizza. So today you ask your parents to bring cheese and tomato, they bring you cheese and tomato. Tomorrow you've decided, no, that's it, I'm no longer going to have cheese and tomato. They bring you cheese and tomato, and now you're disappointed. Why? Because, your desire changed. You got the same object, and that has changed. But the other way around is also true. You like cheese and tomato, but say they've run out of cheese, or they've run out of tomato at the restaurant, and now they send you a chicken pizza, and now you're going to be disappointed again. This is the problem. They're all conditioned, whether it's in your mind or in the outside world. Everything is absolutely conditioned, which is what Sankathai means. Sang being bringing together of what? Of conditions. And Kata is creation. Karma, the doing. So the doing of bringing things together and then putting it through the Paticca Samuppada process gives rise to Bhavapacchaya Jati. That is how Jati comes into this world. Jati, or types of existence, all kinds of objects, beings, human or non-human, living or non-living. This is how these things come into the world. Now, the problem with those things that have come through the Paticca process is, actually thinking about this, it's a bit like an architect. An architect wants to create a structure, a building, and he then looks at, well, he has a drawing in his mind which he puts on paper, and now he decides, well, these are the things that I need to build this house. So he knows that the things I need to build this house are, or this building, are concrete, iron rods, I'll need some cement, I'll need stones, I'll need sand, I'll need water, I'll need bricks, I'll need floor tiles and wall tiles, I'll need paint, I'll need wood for the doors, I'll need copper for the wires, and then all sorts of... So he has a list of all of these things that need to come together to create this object. And remember, the house is nothing but the bringing together or the coming together of these objects. If you take them all apart again, well, where's the house now? There is no house. You bring all those parts back together again, you have the house. You take them apart again, there's no house. So the house is nothing but the result of an equation. It's like if you ask someone, what is the number 10? It's nothing but 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 10 times is 10. Nothing else. Without 1 being added to 1 10 times, you're not going to have a 10. You take one of them away, what do you have now? 9. You take 2 of them away, you have 8. You put them 2 back again, you have 10. So the result 10 is nothing but the result of the equation where you add 1 10 times over. And likewise, everything in this world, whether it's a house, whether it's a human body, whether it's a shirt or a trouser or a glass or a water or a computer, whatever it is, I mean even chemicals. What is water? 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom brought together. You split them apart, where's water gone? There's no water. You take 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms and 6 oxygen atoms and bring them together, now you have a molecule of glucose. You take away 1 oxygen atom, what do you have? Well, there's no glucose now. So it's just the being together, it's exactly that, it's the being together of the conditions that give rise to a result. This is why we call them Sankathai. As long as these conditions are together, you have the result. Okay? And what the Paticca process is putting all of those raw materials into this process. It's like a machine. You put the raw materials into the machine is Paticca, and out comes the Sankathai. Sankathaya. Sankatha is an attribute. Sankathaya is the result of that which has gone through the Paticca process. What has been through the Paticca process and what is the Sankathaya has 2 other attributes, and that is they are Kayadhamma and they are Vayadhamma. Ka is that which is lowly, that which is of little value. So Ka Ayadhamma or Kayadhamma is that which deteriorates, that which reduces and diminishes in value and in quality. That is what Kayadhamma means. Now, what does that actually mean? What does Kayadhamma mean? Remember that we're talking about the attribute of a world here. So these 4 attributes are attributes of the world. By attributes I mean features. Okay? These attributes are of the world, and this is the world that we have created in our mind, not the world outside. Because the world outside is not my problem. The world inside is my problem. Okay? So what is the Kayadhamma that is an attribute of the world that I have inside my mind? Because the world in my mind I created myself, and as a solution to this frustration and agony and suffering that I had inside me, this feeling of frustration and anxiety. To relieve myself from this anxiety, I created this world inside me. What I don't realize is, in doing so, I create something that also is conditioned, and when the conditions change, decay and die. So what's really happening is, I have created this world because to relieve myself from the suffering of decay and death. And I'm not talking about decay and death of an animal here. I'm talking about the decay and death of thoughts, thought moments here. Because at every moment we have billions of thoughts that decay and die. And with billions of thoughts that decay and die, any being, any sentient being that is attached to this process of regenerating thoughts, because what do thoughts do? They do Vedana Sanya. Vedana being knowing, and Sanya being identifying. Okay, so that's what we all want to do. When we hear a sound outside, we want to know what it is, and then we want to go and identify what it is. We want to know that, we've just heard a sound. That's knowing a sound. And then you want to go and identify that sound. Then you know it's a song, or it's a three-wheeler, or it's a bus, or it's some kind of bird. Okay? So the reason we do those things, even when they have absolutely no value to us. Now I can hear a bird outside. But what value does that add to me right now? Knowing that it's a bird. Absolutely nothing. So why does my mind process the sound it hears and then comes to the conclusion that it's a bird? It's because my mind wants to know. My mind wants to know and it wants to identify. Wants to know and identify. This is what Vedana Sanya is. And for as long as we suffer from the wanting to acquire Vedana and Sanya, your mind is constantly going to do this. An Arahant is someone that has relieved themselves from this suffering. They no longer suffer from this anxiety. Okay? So, because we have this suffering, because we are suffering from this anxiety, we go forth and create a Sankathai. We create a Sankathai to relieve ourselves from the suffering, from the anxiety of wanting to know, of wanting to go and touch and find out, of wanting to taste and find out, of wanting to hear and wanting to see and wanting to smell and find out. Why do we do all these things? Because we want to find out about the world. And until we do so, we are suffering. This is why if I tell you a name that you've never heard before, in several sermons before we used the example of durian. We talked about the durian fruit, which you and I may know because we've seen that fruit in Sri Lanka. We might have eaten it. But there will be lots of people who listen to this sermon who might not know what that fruit is. So if it's a fruit that you don't know, or if it's just a word you never heard before, then you're wanting to know what it is. As soon as I give you that word, you hear that word, you process it, now you put that word into this box called Sanya, and now what you do is you try to fill the other boxes. Remember, these are pentagons. These pentagons have 5 sides, this is why it's called a pentagon. One of these sides is a Sanya, and into this box or Sanya, that is identification, you put the word durian, and now you want to know what it looks like. You want to know what it tastes like. You want to know what it is in the first place. If I didn't tell you it was a fruit, you'd be, where do I get one? What is that? Is it a feeling? Is it a person? Is it someone's name? Is it something you eat? Is it something you live in? Because you want to know, you want to find out. So you're always suffering. There's always this anxiety of wanting to know, wanting to find out. And for as long as you have this anxiety and this frustration, you want to relieve yourself from that. Now, for as long as you have delusion, for as long as you have ignorance, and what is ignorance? The ignorance of the 4 noble truths. The ignorance of, so the Lord Buddha says, dukkha ajnana, dukkha samudaya ajnana, dukkha nirodha ajnana, dukkha nirodha gamini patipadaya ajnana. So not knowing about the dukkha arisatya, dukkha samudaya arisatya, dukkha nirodha arisatya, and dukkha nirodha gamini patipada arisatya, which are the 4 noble truths. So not knowing that results in someone coming to the conclusion that actually, why don't I go and build something in the world? Why don't I go and do something? Why don't I do some abhisankara? Whether that is through thought, that through speech or through action, which will then help me relieve myself from this frustration. Frustration of what? Wanting to know. Wanting to identify. Okay? So why don't I do that? The reason we do that is because of ignorance. Now for as long as we suffer from this ignorance, we go and create Sankathas. We go and create Sankathas by putting the raw materials into the Paticca process. And the Paticca process, as I said, exists in our mind. What we are attached to, we create in the outside world. Now, the reason we did all of that was to relieve ourselves from frustration. But the reality of anything that has gone through Paticca process is that it is subject to death, it is subject to old age, it is subject to decay, it is subject to not giving me what I want, it is subject to bringing me things that I don't want. Why? Because it's all conditioned. When the conditions change, the result changes. But what did I expect? What I had in my mind. And the reason I did that was to relieve myself from frustration. Now, when the world changes again, I'm disappointed. So I did this whole process to relieve myself from frustration. But what do I get in the end? Even more frustration. Even more suffering. So it's like me jumping from the pot to the fire. Now, this is why I do this. This is because this is what ignorance tells me. Go and do this thing. Go and create something. Go and say something. Go and think something. Do these abhisankaras so that you can relieve yourself from suffering. But what I'm actually doing is creating something, creating what's in my mind and projecting it into the outside world, and in the process of doing so, creating something that is subject to death, to decay, to old age, and ultimately something that brings me suffering. So to relieve myself from suffering, I've gone into even more suffering. It's a bit like, say you've got some kind of disease, you've got a cold, you go to the doctor, he gives you medicine, and if he's not a good doctor, he might give you some kind of drug which you bring home, and now that's not curing your cold. Well, actually, there are no medicines for a cold. But say you've got a headache. You've gone to the doctor to ask for a medicine for your headache, and he gives you a drug. It doesn't cure your headache. And what it does, in fact, is actually gives you a stomachache as well. Now you've got a headache and a stomachache. If you didn't go to the doctor, you would have just been with a headache. So have you not just jumped from the pot to the fire? And this is what we do when we go through the Paticca process. Ignorance tells us, go to the doctor. And this doctor is not someone that is qualified. This doctor is not someone that understands the problem. The only doctor that we have not gone to throughout our life in samsara is the Lord Buddha. We've been to every other kind of doctor. We've been to doctors when we wanted to earn more money. We've been to doctors when we wanted to be happy. Well, quite literally, the reason we went to all the doctors that we've been to so far is because we wanted to be happy. We went to friends, we went to engineers, we went to lawyers, we went to teachers. We went all over the world, spoke to all kinds of people and said, I want to be happy. Give me some medicine for that. What did they say? Do more things, build more things, say more things and think more things and do all these abhisankaras and you'll be happy. Well, when did we ever be happy by doing that? This is why when we come to the only doctor that we have not been going to all this time, for the first time in samsara we come to the doctor who actually gives us the proper medicine. Why? Because he has no ignorance. He is free from ignorance and he teaches us, for as long as you go to a doctor that is suffering from ignorance, that has the condition of ignorance, he's going to tell you, create Sankathas. Create Sankathas by pumping raw materials through the Paticca process. But ultimately the result of that is you're going to be subject to Kaya Dhamma. These are Dhammas that you create that bring you even more suffering than when you started. So, in fact, you're better off not having gone to them in the first place. Okay? And then you have Vaya Dhamma. Now, Vaya Dhamma, because if something is given rise to through the Paticca process, then when you eradicate the Paticca, the effects of the Paticca process, then they decay and they die. So, in fact, it's best understood if you actually look at these four attributes in terms of Sankathai, Paticca, Vayadhamma, Kayadhamma. Because it's because of the fact that it is Vayadhamma. Vaya meaning when the conditions cease to exist, the result ceases to exist. When Venerable Sariputta gives the discourse of the Udaya Vijnana, when he discusses the Udaya Vijnana, or the knowledge of how things come into being and how they cease to exist, Udaya Vaya. So this is the Vaya Dhamma we are talking about here. How the Udaya process, or the process through which something comes into being, is Paticca, and the process through which it ceases to exist is the reverse of the Paticca process. In other words, the Vaya process. So he says, Venerable Sariputta says, if you take, for example, the form, material form, Rupa, he says, Avidya Samudaya, Rupa Samudaya, and then he says, Avidya Nirodha, Rupa Nirodha. When Rupa comes into, when ignorance comes into being, Rupa comes into being. When ignorance ceases to exist, then Rupa ceases to exist. And Rupa there being material form. And again, remember, we're talking about the world in our minds, we're not talking about the world outside. And we discussed Rupa in that context in the previous sermon. So, because it came through the Paticca process, when the Paticca process is no longer able to provide the conditions to maintain it in that state, what's going to happen is it's going to decay. And it's going to go to death. And that is the attribute of Vayadhamma. So when it goes through Vayadhamma, then there is no doubt, and we shouldn't be under any surprise that we are then subject to Kayadhamma. And as I explained before, these things cease to exist, and what ceases to exist now is what I projected through my mind into the outside world, and because that's what I'm attached to, I'm going to go into suffering. I'm going to be disappointed. Why? Because this is what I expected, I wanted it from the world, I'm now not getting what I wanted, so naturally I'm going to be disappointed. So those are the four attributes of the world, and this is again the world that we create in our minds. Sankathai, Paticca, Samuppannai, Vayadhammai, and therefore Kayadhammai. So if we can understand the world through these four attributes, what we begin to realize is the reason we've been doing all of this, as I said a few minutes ago, the reason we've been doing all of this is to be happy, to find satisfaction, to find fulfillment in our lives. And to find that satisfaction, happiness and fulfillment in our lives, what we've been doing is is creating the world in our minds, a world that does not exist outside, projecting that world onto the outside material world, Apo, Tejo, Vaya, Patavi, pumping those thoughts through the Paticca process, and as a result, seeing that there's a circle out there when there is no circle, seeing that there's a queue in the world when there's no queue. I mean, I'll give you another example. Think of a time when you're in a supermarket. You're in the supermarket and there are people standing by a till. You've got a basket full of things that you want to pay for. Okay? So you walk up to the till. You don't see that actually there's no checkout clerk by the till, but you know that there's a till there. Now you see that there are a bunch of people standing around. So you then go, you think that there's a queue there, and you go and stand at the end of this queue. What you don't realize is actually there is no checkout clerk, and these people are just standing there because they're waiting for someone else to come and walk them out of the store. But because you saw a till, your mind's telling you that I've got a basket full of things, I've seen a till, I'm seeing some people, so they must be standing in a queue. A queue that did not exist, created in your mind. You then projected it outside into the world, and now you're seeing a queue that doesn't exist. And now, what's going to happen if someone walks past you and comes in front of you and stands in front of you? You're going to be angry. Why? Because you're seeing a queue that does not exist. That queue went into Vayadhamma. The queue that was in your mind was subject to Vayadhamma, and it ceased when the conditions in your mind ceased to exist. And now you're suffering. You're suffering why though? Because you set yourself an expectation. This is a queue. So in a queue, you have there's a certain way that you behave in a queue. You stand in line, and you stand one after the other. You don't jump around. You wait for your turn. Okay, all of these things you create in your mind. You create in your mind and you expect it from the outside world. And when the outside world doesn't operate to what you have in your mind, when the outside world is not to your Paticca process, then you suffer. Remember, if there are 7 billion people in this world, there are 7 billion Paticca processes running every second. Every microsecond there are 7 billion Paticca processes running. Unless they are an Arihatun Mahansa. These Paticca processes are creating 7 billion kinds of worlds outside, in their minds, in these people's minds. And these 7 billion worlds, they're projecting onto the outside world. Now you want to live the world that's in your mind. What about all the other 7 billion people? What about all the other 7 billion people who want a different kind of world? You're wanting to live the world that you want, and all the other 7 billion minus 1 want to live the world that they want. When are you ever going to be happy? This is why we say you cannot find happiness in the outside world. For as long as you create this world in your minds and you expect that to be fulfilled and satisfied in the outside world, you're never going to find happiness. And that is what is explained in Why Dhamma. Why Dhamma, when the conditions cease to exist, the result ceases to exist. But if you're then attached to it, then you're going to suffer. So, I hope that provides a sufficiently elaborate answer to that question. But if it's still not clear, then by all means, please drop us another message, and we can cover that in more detail and add more context and perhaps more length if required. But I think that provides a suitably comprehensive answer to that question. Okay, so with that, I think we'll bring the sermon to a close. Let us take a moment to confer the merits that we have all acquired in the course of delivering this sermon and in the course of listening to this sermon, to all those devas and brahmas that we invited at the start of this sermon, whether that is by thought, by speech, or through action. If we have invited any past relations, any devas, any brahmans, and those beings who rejoice in the merits of others, may they all be able to acquire these merits. May they be able to use these merits to be born in the blissful plane, if any of those are born in the woeful planes. May any devas and brahmas, any demons, any spirits rejoice in these merits. May they be able to use these merits to seek the liberation that they are looking for, either through becoming a Samma Sambuddha, a Pacceka Buddha, or an Arahata Buddha. May these merits also help all of those beings that we have come in the past, we have come past in samsara and done harm to, being unkind to, being ungenerous to. May they be able to acquire these merits and find happiness in their hearts and happiness to be able to forgive us for what we have done. May anyone that helped us organize these sermons, including anyone that might have given us shelter to host these sermons, may they all be able to rejoice in these merits. May these merits help them live a life that takes them towards Nibbana with every passing day, with every passing moment. May they be able to understand that happiness is not something that can be found in the outside world, because the world is simply a bag full of, an ocean full of, a world full of anicca, dukkha, anatta. So may they be able to use these merits to fulfill their wisdom, to to find any gaps in their understanding and to fulfill these. And also anyone that might have helped us with technology, helped us with setting things up, helped us with transport or anything of the sort, be able to rejoice in these merits. And also anyone who is involved in transcribing these sermons, may they all be able to receive these merits, and with every effort that is being made to disseminate this Dhamma to all those beings in the universe who are thirsty for this Dhamma, who are looking for this Dhamma, who are looking to find the path to liberation, the path to salvation, may they all rejoice in these merits, and may these merits help us all achieve the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this birth itself and in the era of the Gautama Samma Sambuddha itself. May you all attain Nibbana in this birth itself. May you all attain Nibbana in the era of the Gautama Samma Sambuddha itself. May all beings attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Very much.